Hello, and thank you for joining us today. It's Sunday, the day after the night before, or in this case, the day after the game before. Rangers, of course, winning 3-1 at Parkhead. It's not many times we've had the opportunity to come on a video after such a titanic win at Celtic's home, so it's going to be an enjoyable look back over a game that was interesting. Bonkers is perhaps the best word that I've got for it. But there's so much to chew over. There's so much to get our teeth into. Josh and I were arguing about stuff as the game was going on. So I'm interested to really drill into the detail of what was going on. I haven't read his piece this morning. I think Joshua, as usual, was correct. But it won't stop me from blundering about with my big opinions and challenging them anyway to try and give you some fun. So let's get stuck right in, Josh, because
Yeah.
as you know, we were all furiously tweeting at halftime. We were all absolutely blown away by just how bloody awful Rangers were in that first 45 minutes. Celtic, by far the better side, dominated the game. You had that first 5 or 10 minutes where, maybe even 7 minutes, to be honest, where Rangers actually started quite well, and you thought, okay, this is good, but Celtic came into the game, visibly grew in confidence, created one chance, quickly created another, became a bit of a snowball. And listen, half time, Rangers were lucky to be 1-0 down. It should and could have been certainly two and probably three. Jack Butland didn't cover himself in glory for the goal itself, but still made a couple of good saves other than that. Probably the most obvious one from Johnny Kenny. It was a poor finish, but Butland still had to get out and get down and deflect over. And he made another good save from Johnny Kenny as a half-hour on. So we were all pretty angry at what we'd seen at half-time. We were all going back into the mode of, well, this is why Rangers should have already spent money in the transfer window. And then second half, it couldn't have been more different. Now, older viewers will remember Jimmy Greaves and his "it's a game of two halves" cliche, but there was never a game that more underlined the truism of that cliche. And wow, Rangers are a completely different side. Celtic, if Rangers were different, Celtic were completely different. And that gave them the platform to go on and win the game. So, Josh, I suppose my first question is, what went wrong in that first half? Why were Rangers so bad after a reasonably good opening 5 or 6 minutes?
Yeah, well, as you say, we've done a lot of these videos of Old Firm games, in particular at Parkhead in the past few years, where the rewatch the next morning has been the deciphering of what went wrong. So it was, and I thought at halftime, I thought it was going to be another example of that. And at halftime, I think it was a pattern of a lot of these Old Firm games we've seen under loads of different managers, whether it be Nancy or Postecoglou, Rodgers at Celtic, whether it be Clement or Rohl or Giovanni Van Bronckhorst at Rangers, where Celtic had the ability to control the ball and play out under pressure, which gave them a platform, and they pressed Rangers more effectively. And in contrast, Rangers went man for man, went for quite an ambitious, aggressive approach. But as we're going to come on to look at, once one mistake was made, that was broken quite easily. And I think you need to give Rohl a lot of credit for what he changed in the second half. This game kind of summarises Danny Rohl's tenure so far for me, Johnny, because he didn't inherit a perfect picture, far from it. He made a comment pre-match where he effectively said, look, my tactical idea, philosophy, it's not, I'm not trying to maybe build it in its completion at the moment. I'm trying to look at my players and work out what is best for them, in stark contrast maybe to what Wilfred Nancy's tried to do, which is to implement his ideas right away. However, I think Rohl, what he did from the start, as we'll look at now, I think a lot of it had to do with his experience of the semi-final at Hampden. So at Hampden, Rangers struggled when they sat off Celtic, and even with 10 men in the second half, they had success when they pressed them. Celtic under Wilfred Nancy played some nice stuff in the middle of the park. We spoke about that pre-match. We spoke about that in the podcast before. There's this narrative that it's been a complete mess, and in results it has. But if you watch the first half of Celtic against even Dundee United, for example, very similar pattern to this Rangers game, where when the game is played on their terms, I think they can look like a really good football team. When you can force it onto your terms, they probably struggle to adapt. So what we saw Danny Rohl do, and as you can see in the image above, is go man for man. And he basically often when coaches go man for man, they want to be really aggressive, force the issue, and believe that their pressing is more effective than the opponent trying to play out. And it wasn't in the first half. So you can see Manny Fernandez here has tracked his man all the way into near the Celtic box, and Nico Raskin has too. This kind of distills the issue in an image, Johnny, because think of the distances they have to cover. The reason I think at points Manny Fernandez looked a step off when he's trying to track Johnny Kenny's runs in behind him is because he's covering these huge vertical distances. Similarly, Nico Raskin. And on too many occasions, because Celtic had a lot of these fluid rotations, they were bringing Luke McCowan in, as we'll see in a second, from left wing back. You had a load of Rangers players who were in advanced aggressive positions, but they weren't putting pressure on the ball. So you can see here that Rangers have 7 men against Celtic 7 men in the opposition half. The issue is there's no pressure on the ball. So you've got a 3v3 behind you. And on this situation, there's a few examples early on where Rangers got away with it. But very quickly, when Tello Asgard gets this yellow card, you see, oof, this is risky. The key thing to look at in this scenario is twofold. One, Manny Fernandez's positioning. He's not out of position as per se. He's following instruction of tracking his man high up the pitch, trying to stop passing options. But when Rangers make one mistake on the ball and Luke McCowan intercepts it, you can see there he's about to create a 3v2, isn't he? The centre backs are split wide, Sturtler, the right back, and John Souttar. And Luke McCowan has moved inside the pitch from left wing back. That's really important, as we'll come on to discuss when we look at what Danny Rohl said post-match. But Celtic controlled the middle of the pitch. The rotations were too quick for Rangers to adapt to. Manny Fernandez was pushing in to try and stop that, but Celtic were basically a step ahead in their possession compared to Rangers pressing. And just one final image of the first half before I come back to you, it sums it up pretty nicely here. You had a lot of these type of situations where Celtic had a 4v3 in the middle of the pitch. Either it was McCowan coming in from left wing back, or it was Engels dropping off. The player I've highlighted in Rangers yellow there is Mikey Moore. The reason he's not dropping into mark Arnie Engels is because Rangers pressing was man orientated. So it was man for man. He's marking Anthony Ralston there. Someone else should be marking Arnie Engels. Maybe it's Nico Raskin, who you can see without a man there. But because there were so many rotations, especially when Rangers press was broken at the top end of the pitch, when they fell back, it was very disorganised. I think that's what leads to the Yang goal as well, because people are going, who am I supposed to be marking here? The big change between the first half and the second half is in the first half, Rangers are pressing man for man, as you see here. The position of Fernandez and Raskin is dictated by where their men are. What changed in the second half, as we'll come on to look at, is Rangers pressed around the ball. They protected the centre of the pitch. And while Celtic therefore had the overload, had the control of the middle of the pitch in the first half, because of what we'll come on to look at role changes at half time, the orientation of how they were pressing changed.
Yeah, really interesting, Josh. Lots to get our teeth into there. I think one of the things that I would ask, or I would put to you, is what do you think that Danny Rohl himself thought there was to be gained by this strategy? Just because I've obviously watched a number of Celtic games now, and I think quite a few people have watched Celtic games, because there was always that sense of drama around their fixtures over the last few games, that there was going to be something quite interesting happening. And in the domestic games in particular, the managers that they've gone up against, like Jim Goodwin and Stephen Robinson, they have forced Celtic's spare man out wide, so that they put balls into the box, because I think their ideology, or their idea is that, well, if they have a spare man out wide and they fling balls into the box, even if they're high quality, we've got big, strong centre halves that can head the ball away, or we can deal with the balls into the box. Why do you think Danny Rohl went against that? Is it overconfidence? Was it a sense that Rangers could really hurt Celtic by going man for man? Was it a sense that maybe you could go and get an early goal and bring the crowd on top of them? What do you think it was?
It's a good point, because I was surprised that in my predicted team I had James Tavernier right wing back. I think it was the right decision to not start him in the end, because Dujon Sterling gave you a lot of physicality and power and just defensive ability on the right side. But it's not really in keeping with what we've seen from Rohl so far. So if you think Tynecastle away plays a 5-3-2 with like 8 or 9 defensive-minded players in there. If you think to what he's done so far, he's based his Rangers ideology kind of on set pieces and playing the margins and defending first and clean sheets. I think he just wanted to get after Celtic a bit and and turn the crowd, but and also can probably continue with what he'd been doing so far. So you had Jeji Gassama as that right back, right wing back. You had Telo Asgard off the right hand side at points in possession. And although I think hindsight shows you should have played Mo Diamandi in a game like that because he's consistently good against Celtic, I think Rowe probably made the calculation of let's try and stick a bit with what we've been doing to this point, and also try and get after Celtic. But you're absolutely right to identify that what teams have done generally against Celtic is they've cut off the ball to Callum McGregor, and they've stopped Celtic from going through him. They've left one of the centre backs on the ball and they've forced them wide. And that's what as we'll come on to, that's what we saw Rangers and Roll do in the second half. So when he was asked about it post-match on Sky, he said, I was not angry. For me, it was about finding solutions. We changed to three midfielders at halftime, so 4-3-3. We pressed them in a different way. And from the beginning, you could feel that Celtic could not get through. They couldn't find the free man they normally want to find. We were much better organised. And then after ball-winning situations, we played straight forward. So that's quite a nice summary of what exactly Rangers changed. And we can see it here in this image right away. If two images sum up this game, Johnny, it's maybe this one here, right, where Celtic in the first half had the free man in the middle. They normally, or this one, they normally had the overload. They normally had the control and the most important part of the pitch in the area they want to. In the second half, they still had a free man in possession, but it was out wide. And Rangers, that shape is very different because they're orientated around the ball in the centre of the pitch instead of going, who's my man? I'm going to follow him and try and press aggressively that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a significant change in that second half. And I actually think Danny Rohl, in one of the interviews, I was looking for it there while you were talking, Josh, he said something along the lines of, I had an idea of how I wanted to play. I would have loved to have this quote, but I don't have it. It was something like, I had an idea, and sometimes these ideas don't come off. So I was keen to get them in at halftime. And there's no doubt that what he did with this midfield made a difference. Let's just touch on Telo Asgard for just a moment, because there was a lot of discussion about Telo Asgard. I was surprised, even though he scored in the last two games, that Asgard was selected for this game on the basis of he is a guy that disappears. Even though he's got the physicality, he's not good off the ball. I think that's a major problem. My midfield three was Sterling, Barron, and Raskin, with Raskin pushed into the 8 role and allowing the other two to sort of control the base. I was surprised that he went for Asgard. But there's no doubt by making the change, it corrected everything.
Yeah, it did. And Derek and I spoke about this in the post-match show, and we said, look, did a yellow card play into Asgard's performance off the ball? And probably it did to a degree. I think that if we contrast it to what Diamandi did, he obviously played deeper. He allowed Barron and Raskin to play higher up the pitch, but he took the ball in. And that's what Rangers lacked in the first half. And that issue remains, as much as their second half was better. And that's something they need to solve. It's why Rangers want this number 6 in January, as we've spoken about and reported about a lot, because the first half is a technical quality issue as much as anything else. Also, I think what Diamandi showed, maybe compared to Asgard, is a tenacity for this game. You saw it with Chermiti, you saw it with Butland responding, you saw it with Sterling, whereas I think the game did pass Asgard by. That probably feeds into, you're asking, why did Rule go with this shape, this structure in the first half? It's probably because he wanted to give his team an element of a familiar feel on the ball. And if you listen to his press conferences as of late, he's identified that as an issue. He said, look, our connections on the ball aren't good enough. We need to improve that. So I think the reason he didn't start with this 4-3-3 at the start is because Rangers haven't really played it. And maybe his thinking was, those relationships won't be there. Asgard has scored 2 and 2. He's a threat from set pieces. And as we've seen from Rule so far, he's probably not making perfect decisions. He's making percentage decisions. And Diamandi started at Tynecastle and he was really bad in that first 45 minutes. So that would be my rough thinking as to why Asgard started that first half.
Yeah, okay. Let's. Is there any more you want to discuss before we start drilling into individuals, Josh?
Yeah, just I guess to show the really important thing I want to highlight from the second half is just the fact that Rangers pressed the ball and they didn't press the man. So again, they protect the centre of the pitch first. You're speaking there about the Celtic finding the free man in wide positions. This is the build up to their first goal. All game, we'd seen Celtic be able to play into the middle of the pitch up until this point. This was one of the first occasions where you see Rangers protect the centre, moving more of a way akin to like a Michael Beale or a Steven Gerrard.
I was going to say,
protect the centre. Yeah. And again, that's why this game follows quite a familiar pattern. The ball goes down here. Again, really important point to show. Celtic do have their 3v2. They have an overload, but it's on the other side of the pitch. So you're not fussed about that because it takes a long time to get over there. You can compensate. If you contrast it again to this image of Mikey Moore, if I can pick it out, in the first half, Rangers were often leaving a man on the outside. They were marking that man in this situation. But this time they're basically going, we don't care. We're going to protect the centre first, push you wide, win the duel there. And from this moment, that's how they spring forward and then attack in the wide areas. This image sums it up for me. The second half, it's Rangers who control the middle of the pitch. You can see that Celtic, I think it's Yang maybe at left wing back there, but this is a still just before Mikey Moore's goal. Look at the proximity of Rangers' 11 outfield players. They're basically all in one half of the pitch. That's why they were an effective press inside in the second half, because they were closer together. They were set up to win second balls. They had Diamante who took the ball and drove forward for 2 goals. And this time, again, key point to emphasise, they're orientating their positioning around the ball instead of the man. If that's in the first half, you've got a right wing back out there who's marking Yang, and Gassama isn't in that narrow position free to slide the ball through to Mikey Moore.
Yeah. One
final image to depict this is the pass network from the first and second half. What you see on the left hand, this is just the average positions where players made their passes from and received them in. On the left hand side, you can see at least two white players in each wide zone and a very, very open middle of the park. In the second half, look at that midfield 3 and front 3. Ignore James Tavernier because he's a substitution. Close proximity, around the ball, crowding it. Rangers adapted, Celtic didn't, and although Celtic had good opportunities, that's why they ended up winning the game for me.
And just to play into what you said earlier, look at the difference in Emmanuel Fernandez positioning.
Yeah, exactly.
Underlines it. Yeah, fascinating. I suppose that the one negative, similar to the way that Rangers used to play under Michael Beale and Steven Gerrard, would be that if Celtic had the nous to play crossfield balls, if they were able to play quick, accurate crossfield balls, that's the kind of the kryptonite of this system. But Celtic didn't show any awareness or tactical comprehension. They kind of play one way, and that's how they do it.
They're dogmatic, and again, that works for them in the first half, and they create a lot of opportunities. But if we go back to this image, I think it's this one here. I think as a coach, you accept that, don't you? Because there's going to be a weakness somewhere, and you'd rather concede territory out wide. The difference was, again, in the first half, Rangers were conceding passes in these positions here because they're not compact. So although players are in the centre, they're not connected as a midfield 3. Everyone's going, is that man my man or your man? Because if Manny Fernandez is tracking Arnie Engels for a minute, but then he passes them on, we saw this a lot under when it was Gio against Postecoglou. You need to be really switched on to play that way. And because Rangers weren't stretching Celtic because they had no security on the ball, all the momentum was going back towards their goal. So is it a perfect plan? Do Rangers need to improve on the ball? Yes, absolutely. But I think this just it goes to show that what players need in a halftime like that yesterday, and I wrote this in the piece, what people would say about Danny Rohl at Sheffield Wednesday is he's not going to come in bawling and shouting. You saw him on the TV making his notes at 35 minutes. Players need showing in the modern game an example of or a plan of how they get back into that game. And he changed it up totally, and I don't think we've seen that often at Rangers in recent years of managers, yes, needing players to step up, as we'll finish on, but completely changing their template, completely changing what they're doing, and therefore allowing players the best possible chance of getting back into a game like yesterday's.
Yeah, the slight irony with Rohl is that you think if you're getting a 36-year-old German coach who's been at Bayern and the German national team, you're going to get somebody who is similar to Martin, a total football exponent, a guy who's going to come from the Guardiola's school of positional play. And actually, Roll, for the first time in a long time, Rangers have got a coach that is exactly a modern coach in the moment that it's modern. Because if you look at the Premier League and you look at the way teams are playing, the era of the ideologue seems to be over, and even people like Guardiola and Arteta are introducing pragmatism into what they do. They still have overarching principles and ideas, but there seems to be a lot more flexibility at the top level of elite football now. And here we have someone in Danny Rohl who's absolutely adaptable and reactionary to games, which is the modern way right now. Whereas you look at Nonce and you think, this is a guy who was in vogue 5 years ago. It was the same with Martin. You kind of felt like Rangers are moving to modernity after modernity's already passed them by. But here we are in the moment of modernity. Listen, I know we're short of time, so I want to just pick on a couple of things. Josh, everyone's going to talk about Chermiti, quite rightly so. Yeah. He was brilliant in that second half. But actually, let's be honest, the guy who changed the game was Diamande. So drill into a little bit more of the detail of what he did in terms of, you talked about the lack of technical quality in the middle of that pitch in that first half. Diamande, we know he can be up and down, he can be hot and cold, he's mercurial. But talk about the technical quality that he added in that second half and why it made a difference.
Yeah, just briefly on your point about managers, I agree with that. I think it's a bit of a, Guardiola's changed from a false nine and a Ederson in goals to a Donnarumma and a Haaland within the scope of a few years. So I think there's always been a lot more. I think what proponents like Martin quite often have missed from Guardiola's football is that he's actually the biggest pragmatist in the world. He's just a really good salesman, and he does have a core principle. And it's best summed up by the comparison between the two managers yesterday. See if Wilfred Nancy went to a back five and defended his box for the remainder of that second half. You're not telling me that's not better for the benefit of his Celtic team. You're not telling me that fans won't take to him more. But I think a dogmatist, as Russell Martin did away at Club Brugge when he kept Danilo on with 10 men and didn't defend his box until 5-0. The strength of his system and of his personality to get to that point can also be their weakness. So I agree with you. Refreshing to see someone like Rohl, who is just quite sensible, and that's come out so far. Diamande just took the ball, and he didn't. It wasn't always off the centre backs. It wasn't as if he was turning and completely dictating the play, but he mixed really nicely. And this still here is just when he won the ball at a throw-in and then drove forward in the lead up to Mikey Moore's goal. He really nicely showed experience of this fixture that you need to play forward quickly, but also the relationship with Nico Raskin. That's a midfield three that worked well under Barry Ferguson at Parkhead when Rangers won their last time as well, isn't it? And it's no coincidence to me that he suits these games and struggles in kind of run-of-the-mill league fixtures. I think in many ways Diamande might have developed better as a player if he went to Celtic, because of the type of football that they've played compared to Rangers. And I think that comes out in these games. So I thought he was really good, but he also allowed Raskin and Barron to move forward. And both of their forward, that's another element that Rohl emphasises was far improved in the second half. Running forward.
I wanted to ask you about that, Josh, because one of the things, and I got this wrong, and Barry Ferguson got this right. I criticised Barry at the time for it. Him and his coaching staff didn't think Nico Raskin was a number 6. They felt like there's a lot more in his locker if he pushes forward. And the more I've seen him as a number 6 or trying to play as a number 6, and throughout this season, you do realise that while I think he is good on the ball, I'm not saying he can't pass the ball. He can be untidy. He can be a bit unkempt. Yeah. He isn't the precision guy. But in a lot of ways, as an 8 in Scottish football, where it is a bit rough and tumble, he gives you a lot of what you need in this domestic game. And I just wonder what your feelings are on that going forward. How do you get the best out of these two talented players, Nico Raskin and Diamande, who have got both big strengths and big weaknesses? Maybe both of them slightly different in their strengths and weaknesses. How do you make them successful Rangers players, title winners over the long term?
I think it's telling that Rangers want this number 6 because, as we understand it, they basically feel that that is what raises the level of this midfield. So Diamandi, I think in certain games, Raskin suits playing as a number 6 if it's more about what he does off the ball. You saw that in Europe last season. But he's not a player, and this, I'll always remember a conversation I had with one of his managers at Standard Liège, and I probably write it about 3 times a season. The fact that he can't be static in a game, he's not defined by that in the game. He needs to get after it, and he needs to move forward. And I compare him, not in a talent way before people shout at me, but if you look at what Arsenal have done with Declan Rice and how the number 6 position's evolved in recent years, initially he was signed, I think, as number 6 because of what he could do off the ball. But then as football became more and more transitional, they basically realised, we want him to be doing as much of that running throughout the game as possible, and we want to maybe mitigate some of his slight weaknesses on the ball. So we're going to push him as a kind of a complementary number 6. He'll drop at points, but he actually starts higher. I still don't think that number 8 position Russell Martin had for him was brilliant. I think Barry Ferguson suited him more because he could come deep and get the ball. But for both of these goals, Raskin's forward running for the first goal, but also Barron's forward running for this goal here. And there's similarities with Raskin and Barron, different players, but similarities in that they're both better, I think, when they're, especially Barron, better when he's facing the play and running forward and moving forward quickly, as opposed to that first half where he looked crowded out in midfield. His run here is so important, Johnny, because everyone on commentary is saying, why is Austin Trusty not going to Yusuf Chermiti? And he should engage him a bit quicker. But it's just because Barron makes this sprinting run quicker than any Celtic player recovers. Again, look at the setup here from Rangers. They're the ones who have the overload around the ball, so Celtic can't go down the line. Chermiti does brilliantly to basically win a 2v1 and intercept the ball. But it's the attack and its speed. It's the getting forward quickly when you've regained possession, and it's the willingness of someone like Barron to run forward that makes a big difference. So I thought he was far improved. I thought Diamandi's mixture of taking the ball, combining with Raskin, but also just his kind of tenacity in this game made a big difference. Chermiti's obvious. We spoke about him on the show yesterday. The character to go and do that after what he's faced criticism-wise here is so impressive. I thought Dujon Sterling put in a mammoth performance after being out for most of this year through injury. He's a proper defender. He's
just a top player.
But he's Rangers' best defender by about 2 times. It's not even close in terms of the instinct that he has.
Nobody's talking about that stretch tackle he made on Maida. I think 5 minutes into the game or 6 minutes, very early on. I've not even seen it back.
James Tavernier doesn't make that. No. That's what Rangers. That's if he's in that position for his strength as a player, Maida goes through and he probably scores, and it's maybe a very different conversation. So a wise move to play Dujon Sterling and then Jack Butland as well. We spoke about him last week. His numbers have been really good since Rohl came in, but he's not tended to play well in these fixtures. I think watching the goal back, it's a mistake, but it's not as bad as I first thought because the shot moves, and I think there's a lot of errors leading up to it. But he recovers so well to put in the type of assured showing, again, in contrast to Kasper Schmeichel yesterday, that he's lacked in these type of games. So yes, Rohl, important to point out, Rohl changes the tactics, but he needed, that only gives players a platform, right? And whether it be at Tynecastle or in European games, so far he's not had players to that level to go and step up. But yesterday, Chermiti and Moore with his goal and all the players I've just mentioned managed to do that and turn the game.
Yeah, okay, we're going to call it a day there. We don't want to do a 50 or a 60-minute tactical video, which is what it'll be if we allow this to continue, because I'll keep asking you stupid questions. Listen, thanks everyone for watching. We are obviously going to be back tomorrow morning. I'll be on with Derek. I don't know if there's anyone else on with us, Josh.
Chris as well, I think. Chris
as well. So it's going to be a bonanza. We'll definitely do it longer than half an hour tomorrow. So get your questions ready, get them fired in, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible. But there's so much to talk about. There's so much to go into. There's not going to be an absence of stuff for us to talk about. So until then, guys, thanks for watching, and we will catch you.